So I first want to start with asking a question that everybody was asking me after the announcement of the title, that how the theme of the biennial, A Good Neighbor, was formed. Was it something you were already working on, something you were already thinking on, or was it specifically inspired by Istanbul context or Turkey?
Well, I mean, it's a continuation of themes that we have been working with as artists for many years, where we have been looking at our homes as like kind of a dwelling for self-expression, or where you could live out your identity. That could be on a micro level a symptom of changes in society, since we live in different ways today in big parts of the world than we did 2 or 3 decades ago. And then we were thinking, well, coming out of the home and thinking of what is in our close reality. How could we speak about the challenges of coexistence today in a way that would be less abstract, more something that would have to do with people's real lives. Often we experience that people live together in quite a different way than what the big headlines news announce around the world. And that was our starting point. Also to create a biennial that would be formed and shaped almost like a neighborhood.
And like as everybody mentioned, many of the works of the artists are new commissions. So this means everybody was reacting on the theme, like not prior to the biennial, but after the theme was announced. So could you talk about a little bit different approaches of the artists to the theme?
Out of 56 artist positions, there are more than 30 commissions. Many of the artists have come here for site visits and have reacted to the architecture here, to the situation, to the context of Istanbul. Of course, with their many different backgrounds. There are artists from 32 different countries, but more importantly also from many different cultural backgrounds. And an artist, for instance, like Kemang Baloholera came here and made his work on site in Istanbul Modern, but he sort of brings with him themes that are relevant to his context back in South Africa. For instance, you will see 16 blackboards and 16 birdhouses, and number 16 relates to how many people you're allowed to gather in South Africa before seeking permission, so dealing with the right of assembly, which is of course also a relevant theme here and other places right now. Then you have Turkish artists like Volkan Aslan, for instance, that have made a completely new film. It's actually his first film. It's a multi-channel projection in Istanbul Modern as well. And even though he hadn't actually made a film before, we were really fascinated by his storyboard that he presented us for at an early studio visit. And this is a film where you see 2 women living in a very sort of normal-looking home, each their home, going about their everyday activity, like repotting a plant, rolling a cigarette, having a cup of tea, and so on. And you realize it's dealing with a sort of longing for normality, longing for the safety of a home, but at the same time, you will see that they are leaving, that they are going away. And I think it's also dealing with this tension you have sometimes amongst many people at the moment. I want to stay, but I also I'm longing out.
you will see that many of the artists actually related quite closely to the spatial features of the different venues. A big amount of the artists went to Istanbul actually several times on research visits, and together with us decided for the different venues, and their works are kind of relating to the architectural features, but also the social purpose of the different venues. You have the Galata Greek School, where we have a project like Mike Dian's work, where Mark worked with artists and art students and all kind of participants from Istanbul for a long time, for categorizing plants and fish from Istanbul. And it's a lot of the projects, the artists have dedicated themselves for a long period working with people here to collaborate on their projects for the biennial.
And can we say, like, in different venues, there are different focuses or different themes? Like in Istanbul Modern, we can see several works about working conditions in the first world. And
at Istanbul Modern, Istanbul Modern is at the moment surrounded by construction work and new developments. So many of the works there are reflecting on this urban transformation in one way or another. It will be an artist like Clara Lidén, for instance, with her construction fences, that she has sort of personalized on the other side of the fence. Or an artist like Ryan Tabet from Beirut, who has sort of presented a mixture of columns from a historical building together with the foundations of the building that replaced the historical building. It's a massive high-rise, apparently, at that site now in Beirut. And in Istanbul Modern, we and the artists, of course, have really worked with architectural features. It's a very open plan. It's a former industrial building that gives you a lot of possibilities for these open sculptural installations. At Pera Museum, artists have a quite different approach again. I mean, some of the artists have dealt with this being a museum also for historical Ottoman paintings and objects and artifacts, and have incorporated that into their work. Or the work is also for two artists placed within the Ottoman painting collection space on the second floor. And then we're very happy to have worked very closely with Fred Wilson, who has been here many times and has sort of continued his research that he started for the American Pavilion in Venice in the early 2000s, where he sort of traced the presence of Africans in the Venetian Empire. And he's found parallels within the Ottoman Empire here, and sort of continued this research. And I've sent objects also from Istanbul to Venice, had them worked on by the Murano glassmakers there, for instance, and brought back to Istanbul. It's a very, very layered installation there.
And also, I feel like you were always emphasizing the selection of the venues or your architectural interventions, like you are making a statement about the...
The different venues also represent key institutions in society. Culture is a family house, a small villa in Bauhaus style that now by Mahmoud Khaled has been turned into a kind of house museum, very much maybe also inspired by the nearby Museum of Innocence. The school is a key institution in our neighborhood, a place for learning. We have the hammam, that is also an important part of our lives. We need to go to the spa, we need to get relaxed, we need to pamper ourselves as well and socialize in such a setting. And in the hammam, we have this year 2 parts of the hammam. It was used before in the last edition of the biennial, but at that time there was only the male part open. This time there's also the female part open, and of course we were tempted to turn things around, as we often do. So we have in the bigger male hammam 2 female positions, and we have 1 male position in the smaller female part. So we have been playing with the venues in different ways in order to create this fictional neighborhood and this situation for coexistence for the duration of the exhibition. And it was also important for us to have the venues located within a neighborhood, within a walking distance, that we wanted to make it quite dense and quite contained, so you could experience a venue in a couple of days and walk from place to place. Therefore, we also decided only inviting 56 artists, because we as artists have been part of many biennials, and we have been part of many biennials that were very big biennials. And artists are a bit egocentric, and they don't like not to be noticed. And we have often experienced in our lives that there was not so much communication with the organization or the curator because there were too many artists. And this time, I think we have managed to have quite a close dialogue with most of the artists in this biennial, and together being able to develop the exhibition and let it take shape in a sort of big collaboration all together.
And I don't want to spoil the surprises with more questions, but could you also reflect a little bit 2 amazing publications that coming with the biennial?
It has the same weight as a newborn baby, I think, and that's what it also feels like. One is an exhibition book that also includes the exhibition guide, so you will find the maps and a sort of introduction to each artist and each artist's work within the book. And there are an introduction by us, an essay, and an introduction by Bige as well, of course. And images of the exhibition itself, actually, because we were quite early installing. We started already 2 months before the opening, and we wanted to be ready with the majority before Bayram, the big holiday here, and we succeeded. And the other book is a collection of stories that take the theme of the biennial further in a way. It's 69 stories, also relating to the theme of a good neighbor. And it's become a very rare collection of personal accounts. I mean, many people are talking about their childhood, which is maybe not surprising. That was one of our questions initially, dealing with the biennial. The theme is a good neighbor, a memory from the past. And it seems for many it is somehow this idea of like a good neighbor in a sort of, warm and supportive and fun, safe point in your life. Other people are, of course, problematizing the idea of neighbor and have had rather horrible experience later in life. So it's quite a fun read. There's one enough for each night at the exhibition period.
It's also quite obvious throughout the exhibition that most of the artistic statements from the artists are coming from personal perspectives rather than more general or theoretical mappings. They're like projects that are dealing with both biographical issues in the artist's lives or dealing with issues from where the artists are coming from. And a good neighbor might sound banal, or naive. But that's maybe a conscious choice from our side, because if you dig deeper into that title, well, there are a lot of kind of problems underlaying the issue of neighborhood. After we came up with the title, a lot changed in the world. I mean, we experienced an American president being elected on the account of wanting to build a border wall to the Mexican border, and we experienced the Brexit, and we experienced many political problems. We experienced a coup attempt in Turkey. A lot went in many directions throughout this year when we prepared the biennial. And of course, a good neighbor is written in lower cases. Anything could come before, anything could come after. I think there's invisible question mark after.
But maybe.
Would you like to add something?
No, I just would like to say that the biennial is not only the exhibition or the catalogs. I mean, the public program is such an important part of it. So I would just be curious to hear a little bit about Seidon's thoughts behind the public program as well.
I mean, as you said, like it might sound naive, but when you first tell me the theme of the biennial, it was hundreds of years of history and memories and childhood memories, or what we were experiencing in Turkey in the last 5 years. So I was thinking like, okay, what we were discussing recently here and what we'll be discussing in the upcoming 5 years, like something lying beneath everything, like a question. So I was thinking, like, we were discussing a lot about losing our houses, leaving our houses voluntarily or involuntarily, and what happens when we choose new houses, new neighbors, or new families. So the first title, Chosen Family, was raised from these questions, and it's focusing on community building and how we find our new communities, and the role of emotions in the political activism, and I don't know, queer movement, feminism, migration, and everything that asks us to create our new communities. And then the second question was, I think because living in Istanbul, one of the first things I thought was like, how about our non-human neighbors? How about the animals or trees or the sea environment? So the mutual fate title comes from there, thinking about our relationship with non-human neighbors and also urban ecology, like how the spaces help us relate or not relate with each other. So I chose these two lines, of course, consulting with you, and started to invite people. And it's not only discussions, but cooking sessions and music workshops. So we will keep on reflecting on this, like new forms of reflecting on neighborhoods and neighbors and communities.
Great.
Thank you, Zaino. Thank you, Mikel and Ingar.